Hello everyone, this is Lala and today I'm making yet another video about Prince Naveen and the whole race situation. So I've handled it differently in the past where I talked about him being racially ambiguous and why they made that choice, but today I'm going to do something different where I'm going to try to pinpoint at my best ability to pinpoint what race he is, and of course I'm going to have ChatGPT kind of helping along with this journey. This is something that's just relative fun. There's always so much commotion about what his race is, and it's gotten more and more heightened over the years, especially with people claiming he's Indian, people claiming he's black, blah 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 blah. So I just wanted to do this video just to see what will come up. This is really just fun. So the first question that I asked that I already knew the answer of on ChatGPT is, what race is Prince Naveen? Their response was, Prince Naveen from Disney's The Princess and the Frog is a fictional character whose exact race or ethnicity is not explicitly defined. However, based on the film's context and the creator's statements, we can infer the following. Naveen is from the fictional kingdom of Maldonia, which has a vaguely European-sounding name, but it isn't based on any real country. This gives Disney creative flexibility while avoiding direct associations with real-world nations. His accent, provided by Brazilian actor Bruno Campos, sounds vaguely Mediterranean or Latin, adding to his ambiguous heritage. His skin tone and features suggest a racially ambiguous or mixed background. He appears darker skinned than typical European Disney princess, which has led many viewers to interpret him as potentially South Asian, Middle Eastern, North African, Latin American, or multiracial. Disney intentionally left Naveen's ethnicity vague to allow broader identification and to avoid controversies around interracial representation, especially since The Princess and the Frog features Tiana, Disney's first black princess. In summary, Prince Naveen is racially ambiguous, which signs pointing to a mixed or exoticized background, but Disney never gave him a concrete racial or ethnic identity. So what we're going to do is the exact opposite of what the creators did. We're going to try to pin this down to a specific real-life group. So I asked, according to his phenotype, what group does he look closest to? Their answer is, based purely on Prince Naveen's phenotype, his skin tone, facial features, hair, and overall appearance, he most closely resembles someone of South Asian, Latino, especially mestizo or mixed race, or Middle Eastern descent. Here's a breakdown of the key phenotypic traits and how they align. Skin tone. Medium to olive brown, not as light as the typical European Disney princess, but not dark enough to be read as sub-Saharan African. This pigmentation is common in South Asians, Middle Easterners, North Africans, and many Latin Americans, especially those of mixed European and indigenous ancestry. Hair. Dark brown and wavy, typical of many men from the Mediterranean, Middle East, South Asia, and Latin America. Facial features. Naveen has a straight nose, full lips, a defined jawline, and almond-shaped eyes. These features are shared across a broad range of populations, but are especially prominent amongst South Asians, like Indians and Pakistanis, Middle Easterners, like the Lebanese and the Iranian, Mediterranean Europeans, like the Portuguese and the Italian, and Latin Americans of mestizo or triracial heritage. So, the closest real-world match. Based on these traits and the accents used in the film, the closest phenotypical match would likely be a multiracial Latin American, especially from Brazil or the Caribbean, where European, indigenous, and African ancestry blend, and you see that with the person on the right. South Asian, particularly from northern India or Pakistan, you see that with the person on the left, or Middle Eastern / Mediterranean with mixed background, and you see that with the person in the middle. So pretty much Disney likely designed him to be intentionally racially ambiguous, with a globally appealing appearance that doesn't pin him to one group, but allows broad representation and romantic pairing with Tiana without invoking any special real-world racial politics too directly. So we're going to look into these three larger ethnic groups that were mentioned and go into detail about how they share certain phenotypical traits as Prince Naveen. So I went further into this where I asked them more detail about Naveen looking Brazilian. I asked, does Naveen look like a Brazilian? ChatGPT response, Prince Naveen could possibly be seen as Brazilian, especially considering Brazil's immense racial and ethnic diversity. They also didn't mention that his voice actor is Brazilian, though a white Brazilian. His medium brown skin, dark wavy hair, and ambiguous features resembles those of many mixed-race Brazilians, particularly those with Pardo, i.e. mixed European, African, and indigenous ancestry. This racial category encompasses a wide range of phenotypes commonly seen in Brazil. He especially resembles Afro-Brazilian and Pardo men from urban centers like Salvador, Rio de Janeiro, or Sao Paulo. Brazilians with a mix of Portuguese, African, and indigenous ancestry, similar to models like Marlon Teixeira or actors with multi-racial backgrounds, such as Lazaro Ramos, darker, or Kaua Raymond, lighter, and they are pictured in that order. Brazilian traits that fit Naveen: warm, golden brown skin tone, wavy to loose curly dark hair, ambiguous features that could be read as Latino, Mediterranean, or South Asian. Prince Naveen could definitely pass as Brazilian, especially from a mixed race background, i.e. Pardo. His look is in line with the broad spectrum of appearances found in Brazil's highly multiracial population. Now we're going to move into the next larger Latino group. So the next subgroup that was mentioned is Caribbean Latinos, especially those who are multiracial. So ChatGPT mentioned that Prince Naveen could possibly resemble someone from Cuba, the Dominican Republic, or Puerto Rico, especially those who are triracial or racially ambiguous, which is quite common in those populations. Here's how he aligns with the phenotype commonly found in those Caribbean nations. These populations are generally a mix of African, European, mostly Spanish, and indigenous Taino ancestry. Many people from these islands have medium to light brown skin tones, like Naveen's, dark, wavy, or curly hair, facial features that blend African, European, and indigenous traits, such as straight or slightly broad noses, full lips, high cheekbones, and almond-shaped eyes, and racial ambiguity, often difficult to classify by American binary standards. Naveen's features in context. So his skin tone, a warm medium brown, not dark enough to be read as fully Afro-descendant by US standards, which we clearly see whenever he's next to Tiana, but darker than most white-presenting Latinos, or just white people in general. Hair and features. Dark, wavy hair and mixed features that could easily fit someone from a mulatto or Trigueño background, common terms used in the Caribbean for racially mixed individuals. So we know mulatto is someone who's generally mixed with black and white, and Trigueño is a mix of the three that was listed earlier. Voice and mannerisms. Though his voice actor is Brazilian, his non-American accent and suave demeanor could also loosely align with romanticized portrayals of Latin Caribbean men in pop culture. So I also asked ChatGPT if they can list multiracial Dominican, Cuban, and Puerto Rican men that looks like him, and this is what they had to say. Certainly, Prince Naveen's medium brown skin, wavy dark hair, and racially ambiguous features are reminiscent of several multiracial male celebrities from the Dominican Republic, Cuba, and Puerto Rico, and those backgrounds. Here are some notable figures whose appearances align with his. So there are Dominican men that are mentioned in Jaden Miguel A. Nunez Jr., where it mentions that they all have medium brown skin or olive skin, curly hair, youthful appearance, warm skin tones, versatile features, and classic Latin figures. And then the final group are Puerto Rican, where it lists Anthony Ramos, Jimmy Smits, and Rick Gonzalez, where they have medium golden brown skin, a commanding presence, curly hair, and very expressive, versatile features. These individuals exemplify the rich diversity found within multiracial Dominican, Cuban, and Puerto Rican communities, mirroring the ethnic geographically ambiguous and globally appealing features of Prince Naveen. Okay, so just to conclude this section, it says here that yes, Prince Naveen could absolutely be read as phenotypically similar to a Cuban, Dominican, or Puerto Rican man of mixed triracial ancestry, particularly someone who identifies as Latino but racially ambiguous, just like the Pardo Brazilians that I mentioned earlier. His appearance fits comfortably within the racial and phenotypic diversity of the Caribbean, especially amongst light-skinned or mestizo/mulatto individuals. That said, Disney leaves his background undefined, but if one were to place him, or Maldonia, in a real-world setting based on appearance alone, the Caribbean is a very plausible match, perhaps even more so than Europe, South Asia, or the Middle East, since it's literally right by New Orleans and would be a short travel. So the next ethnic group that comes up, or the next racial group, however you want to define it, is South Asian. And this is for many reasons. Obviously, his name is Naveen, and that is an Indianing. Looking at some of the outfits of his parents, there's definitely some of that inspiration in there. Some claim that he has some phenotypical traits that are very similar. And it definitely makes a lot of sense. So I'm going to read into the description of what ChatGPT says when I mentioned, does he look South Asian? Or what type of South Asian he looks like, since it was mentioned as one of the groups that he is similar to. Here's what they said. Prince Naveen could possibly resemble someone from North India, especially from regions like Punjab, Kashmir, Uttar Pradesh, or even part of Pakistan, such as Lahore or Karachi, where lighter to medium brown skin tones are more sharpened, facial features are common. Here's a breakdown why. So him resembling North Indians from Punjab, Kashmiri, and up is the number one group of South Asian subtypes that he most closely resembles. So when it comes to the skin tone, many North Indians have light brown to olive skin tones similar to Naveen's. Facial structure, straighter noses, almond-shaped eyes, and defined jawlines. Traits that Naveen exhibits are more common in the North than the South. Hair, wavy to straight dark hair is the standard in this region. General phenotype. There's often a degree of West Asian or Central Asian admixture in some North Indian populations, giving a rise to a more pan-ethnic appearance like Naveen's. And once I show you some of the celebrities from this region that are named as similar to Naveen in phenotype, and looking at the average admixture of them, you'll definitely see some of that here. And pretty much everyone but Anthony Ramos's average is an average based on phenotypes that looks like them and groups of people that looks like them. Anthony Ramos doesn't fit because he actually did a DNA test and publicized his results. So his is not an average. And the second group of South Asians that he looks the most like are Indo-Caribbean/Indo-Mauritanians, so essentially descendants of the Indian indentured laborers and indentured servitude within the last 200 years or so. While not a region in South Asia itself, Naveen also resembles diasporic South Asians, especially those in Trinidad, Guyana, Suriname, Fiji, or Mauritius, where South Indian and North Indian genes often mix with African, European, or Chinese ancestry. And you'll see a bit more of that when you look into the average of those areas, which I will show soon enough, resulting in a racially ambiguous medium brown skin phenotype very similar to Naveen's. It states that he does not strongly resemble South Indians, i.e. Dravidian features, typically darker skinned with broader noses and clear hair textures, though there's obviously great variation there. He also doesn't resemble Northeast Indians, Taiputo Burman, who tend to have East Asian features and lighter skin in many cases, and clearly that doesn't fit him. And he also doesn't strongly resemble Sri Lankans or Tamils from the south, whose phenotypes usually differ quite a bit from Naveen's and are kind of similar to the South Indians and the Dravidians. So I asked ChatGPT which North Indian men from either Punjab, Kashmir, or Uttar Pradesh that he looks like, and I got 3. So the 3 that I have here is Karen Singh Grover, Ali Fazal and Kunal Kapoor, where it mentions that they all have medium, warm, and tanned skin complexions, very sharp jawlines, very versatile features, a tall stature, curly to wavy-ish hair, expressive eyes, and very versatile features. I also asked them to compare him to Indo-Caribbean men, so obviously from Trinidad, Guyana, and Suriname, that he most resembles, and I got Gary Bednob, Raymond Ablak, and Dave Baux, with the first being Indo-Trinidadian and the last two being Indo-Guyanese, where they all have warm tan to medium to brown skin, very distinctive facial features, expressive eyes, and very strong features, where a lot of them and a lot of Indo-Caribbean people are descendants of Northern Indians, as they were the main ones who were taken to the Caribbean and even Mauritius and other places as or indentured servants, my bad. The final group that Naveen is attributed to being similar to in this group are Indo-Mauritian men, where they compared him to two people from this group named Alain Ramanisam and Kal Taraboli, where they all have that warm medium skin complexion reflecting some sort of blend of Indian features and some that might suggest something a bit more. So, in conclusion, Prince Naveen's features most closely resemble North Indian or Indo-Pakistani males, especially from the urban or upper caste backgrounds from where fair to medium skin and finer facial features are more common. And since he is a royal literally in the movie, this definitely makes a lot of sense. He could also resemble Indo-Caribbean or Indo-Mauritian individuals with slightly mixed ancestry, adding to his racially ambiguous look. He doesn't look like a stereotypical Bollywood actor, but he does share visual similarities with many North Indian or mixed-descended South Asians, especially with those with diasporic influences. So the next group that came up was Middle Eastern and North African people. And you never really hear this one come up when Prince Naveen is talked about when it comes to fan speculation and whatnot. And it definitely makes sense due to the location fitting more of a Caribbean area when it comes to how Maldonia is described and how close or the travel by boats to New Orleans. And there's a lot of Indian references with Prince Naveen as well. And even that could have some sort of Caribbean tie too. So when I asked what type of Middle Eastern North African people does he look like, it mentioned Prince Naveen's phenotype could plausibly resemble someone from the Middle Eastern North African region, especially certain populations with olive to light brown skin, wavy dark hair, and racially ambiguous features. While he's not a perfect match for any one Middle Eastern North African group, which you will see later because I don't have many celebrities or prime examples listed, here is where he fits best. So the number one group, according to ChatGPT, that he supposedly represents the most are Levantine Arab people. So Lebanese, Syrian, Palestinian, Jordanian. Skin tone. Many Levantines have olive to medium brown skin, like Naveen. Facial features. Straight or gently curved nose, almond-shaped eyes, and sharp jawlines are common. Hair. Wavy or curly dark hair is typical. These populations often have a Mediterranean look, and many Lebanese and Syrians in particular are phenotypically ambiguous, which aligns with Naveen's appearance. 2. North African. So, Moroccans, Algerians, and Tunisians. Oh, I noticed it doesn't even mention Libyans here. Anyways, it says especially of mixed Arab and Berber ancestry. So they have medium brown skin, which is widespread in those populations. Naveen's hair and facial features, so full lips, almond eyes, smooth jawlines, could easily belong to a lighter skinned Maghrebi person, especially in coastal or urban areas with more Mediterranean/European admixture. Many Algerians and Moroccans resemble South Europeans or Middle Easterners, another phenotypic overlap with Naveen. And the final group are Egyptians. Especially urban or mixed background Egyptians may share Naveen's medium skin, dark hair, and facial symmetry. His features aren't strongly Afro Arab, but fit well within the Cairo elite or upper middle class look, sometimes seen in Egyptian media. It also says that out of the Middle Eastern North African groups he doesn't look like, it mentions Gulf Arab, so for example, Saudis, Emiratis, and Qataris. They are often darker skinned and more Arab specific in facial structure, so broader noses and heavier features. He also does not look like Yemenis and Southern Omanis, where they generally have distinct Afro Arab phenotypes that don't match Naveen, and that makes sense due to how close they are to the Horn of Africa. And the last group he doesn't look like are Amazigh, otherwise known as Berbers, from the interior. Some may share skin tone but tend to have stronger indigenous North African features not seen in Naveen. So I was only able to find two people who look anywhere close to what Naveen looks like, especially when it comes to the skin tone, but even the phenotype was off for a lot of the Middle Eastern North African people that they recommended to me, and it makes sense because he really isn't much like them, and he isn't really headcanon or speculated to be like them. Anyways, the two that sticks out to me that he does kind of look like to me is Muhammad Ramadan and Ahmed Zaki. They are both Egyptian. They are relatively medium to brown, dark skinned. They have curly hair, very strong facial features, and expressive eyes. And yeah, I definitely feel like he fits this. He's only a bit lighter than Tiana. And that's really all I have to say about that. So, in conclusion, Prince Naveen most closely resembles Levantine Arabs, especially Lebanese or Palestinian or urban North Africans, like Moroccans or Algerians, with some European or Arab admixture. His skin tone, wavy hair, and racially ambiguous features align with cosmopolitan Middle Eastern North African populations, particularly those with Mediterranean or mixed heritages. Again, he's not a direct match for any one group, but if placed in a Middle Eastern North African context, he'd look most quote-unquote at home among Levantine or Maghrebi people, especially in cities like Beirut, Casablanca, or Cairo. Another group that hasn't really been touched on is the Dougla group. So I asked ChatGPT, does he look like a Dougla? Here's what they said to me. Great question. Prince Naveen could plausibly resemble a Dougla depending on the specific phenotypic traits you're focusing on, but he's not a perfect match, which is why it didn't come up in the top groups. Who are Douglas? Douglas are people of mixed African and Indian descent, primarily found in Trinidad and Tobago, Guyana, and other parts of the Caribbean where both African and South Asian populations settled during and after colonialism. The term Dougla is often used to describe medium brown skin tones, hair textures ranging from wavy to curly to straight, facial features blending South Asian and African traits, such as slightly broader or flatter noses from African ancestry, high cheekbones, fuller lips, and almond-shaped eyes or deep-set eyes, slim to medium bills with racially ambiguous features. Does Prince Naveen look like a Dougla? Similarities. Skin tone. His medium brown complexion could absolutely be found amongst Douglas. Hair. Naveen has wavy dark brown hair, which fits many Douglas whose hair textures are neither tightly coiled nor completely straight. Mixed features. His facial features, straight nose, almond-shaped eyes, full lips are racially ambiguous and could possibly come from a South Asian and African blend. Differences. Naveen's features lean slightly more towards South Asian plus European or Latino, mestizo/mulatto than towards South Asian and African. He lacks the broader nose or more textured hair often found in Dougla populations, stronger African facial features depending on the individual. So, while some Douglas could look like Prince Naveen, he doesn't represent a typical or classic Dougla phenotype. He's a racially ambiguous character, and Dougla is definitely one of the real-world identities that could map onto him, just not the most direct or obvious match. In conclusion, yes, Prince Naveen could pass for Dougla in some cases, especially amongst lighter skinned individuals with more South Asian leaning features, but he's a bit more generalized in appearance, designed by Disney to be quote unquote exotic and ambiguous rather than strongly tied to any one real world mixed identity like Dougla. If anything, he exists in a phenotypic space shared by Douglas, Caribbean mulattoes, and South African coloreds, all of which are racially mixed identities. So, in the same conversation log that this entire video and conversation's been on in ChatGPT, I've asked, out of all the groups we discussed, which one fits him the best. Here's the answer that I got. Among all the groups we've discussed, Dougla, Indo-Caribbean, North Indian, Levantine Arab, Maghrebi, North African, and various Latino subgroups, the one that best fits Prince Naveen phenotypically, culturally, as presented, and in popular interpretation is triracial Caribbean Latino, particularly Dominican, Puerto Rican, or Cuban. So pretty much it goes through all the reasons. I'm really not going to read all of it, but it mentions the phenotypical match of medium brown skin, wavy dark hair, almond-shaped eyes, and balanced features, with it not being strongly African, South Asian, or European. And all of those are very typical of triracial Caribbean Latinos. There's a lot of emphasis on the triracial and the multiracial element. So I think that's what they're focusing on more than the Latino anything. He looks intentionally racially ambiguous, and that is most organically reflected in Dominican, Puerto Rican, and Cuban populations, where features are very common compared to the others, as he does it lean strongly Afrocentric, Eurocentric, or South Asian. There's also the cultural influence, where his suave, musical, flirtatious, and rhythmically gifted persona echoes Caribbean Latino male archetypes. With his presentation being charming, romantic, rhythmic, feels culturally adjacent to a Latin lover stereotype, which is also rooted in Caribbean or Latin American portrayals. The third reason for this is that Caribbean Latinos often defy U.S. racial binaries, where a lot of the other groups, they don't really, not as much, where he could be read as Afro-Latino, multiracial Latino, or just Latino, depending on the context. And then there are also close contenders, where the second one is Pardo or are Pardo Brazilians. This is highly possible, especially because his voice actor is Brazilian, and Naveen's phenotype fits many Brazilians of mixed heritage. Again, the emphasis of mixed heritage. The third is Levantine Arab or Maghrebi, where they also share some racial ambiguity, but they are a lot more different culturally and tonally compared to how Naveen was written. And the fourth contender are Douglas or North Indians, where there's definitely possible phenotypic overlaps, but less likely overall when you factor in the personality and the visual style that is factored into his design and his background and his personality. I also did a separate conversation log on ChatGPT because sometimes when you have all of it in one conversation log, some of the information kind of gets regurgitated or whatever. But if you do it on a different conversation log, sometimes they'll give you contradicting or the complete opposite information. So I wanted to see what they would say in a separate conversation on ChatGPT that isn't attached to that log that I just read over the last several minutes. So here I wrote, out of Latino, South Asian, Middle Eastern, Mediterranean, African, Creole, or a multiracial group, what fits Prince Naveen the best by phenotype and background? Here's what ChatGPT had to say. Prince Naveen from The Princess and the Frog is a racially ambiguous character whose background was never explicitly defined in the film, making his ethnic coding a topic of significant speculation. Based on his phenotype, accent, musical style, and cultural coding, here is a breakdown of which of your listed groups he most closely aligns with. So, the most fitting overall is multiracial, with the bracket being Latino slash South Asian slash Creole hybrid coding. Prince Naveen most plausibly fits into a multiracial identity with overlapping elements from Latino, South Asian, and Creole backgrounds, though none of them perfectly define him on their own. Here's how each applies. Number one is Latino. So interesting how in this completely separate conversation log, Latino is the first one up top. Let's see what they say. Phenotype. Naveen has light brown skin, dark hair, and broad facial features common in Latin American mestizo or triracial populations. Cultural overlap. His charisma, musical flair, and flirtatiousness fits tropes often used for Latin male leads. Accents. His fake accent is vaguely European colonial, but could evoke a Brazilian, Portuguese, or Latin Creole elite vibe. Verdict. Plausible, especially from a lighter skinned or mixed Latin American aristocratic background, but not definitively coded this way. The second is South Asian, and this really isn't surprising based on all the information we covered here and all the fan speculation. Phenotype. Naveen's features, olive skin, thick, dark hair, and almond-shaped eyes, also fit common South Asian phenotypes. His name. Naveen is a South Asian, i.e. Indian male name, so it strongly suggests this origin. Verdict. His name is the clearest South Asian marker. However, nothing else in the film regarding the costume, the culture, the accent supports a fully Indian-coded backstory. This is likely a part of his multiracial coding, not the whole. The third is Creole. So one of the main elements of this is the setting relevance, where the movie takes place in 1920s New Orleans, a hotbed of Creole culture where racial mixing was prominent, and it's pretty clear that Tiana is also Creole based on her accent, the food that she cooks, and Creole at this point in time is associated with African American culture, though obviously there's a whole separate delineation and culture of Creoles, and that's a whole other conversation, but African American and Creole had a lot of ties together, especially in 1920s New Orleans. The social status. As a foreign prince, he could easily be from a fictional Creole island monarchy, similar to colonial Caribbean or Louisiana Creole elites. Remember, New Orleans is really at the top of the Caribbean Sea. Naveen travels there by boat, so he's obviously traveling to the Caribbean. It would make sense for Maldonia to be some sort of Caribbean island that is similar to a colonial Caribbean or Louisiana Creole elite. And there are Creole countries or communities in the Caribbean that has nothing to do with Louisiana Creole. I know Haiti's the biggest one, but I'm pretty sure there's other smaller ones. Musical affinity. His love for jazz and effortless rhythm ties him to Creole/New Orleans culture, and it was something that he was very, very, very familiar with before he ever stepped foot into New Orleans. It wasn't like he became a fan of it once he got there. He was a fan of the jazz and the atmosphere well beforehand. Verdict. Very likely in influence. A fictional Creole elite background makes sense. The fourth most common is Middle Eastern. So, one thing pointing to this is the accent and dress. His accent could be read as vaguely Mediterranean or Levantine by some. There's nothing distinctly Arabic, Persian, or Turkish in his design, though. Verdict, less likely. There are minimal cues beyond vague ambiguity. Fifth, Mediterranean, which references Italian, Greek, and Spanish. Phenotype. Naveen could resemble a tanned Southern European. Whale vibe. Some aspects, likely his princely arrogance, echo a European playboy archetype. Verdict. Plausible as part of a Creole or colonial mix, where that obviously includes Mediterranean generally, but not a perfect fit on its own. And the sixth and last is African, skin tone. Naveen is brown skinned, but not coded as black or of African descent in voice, narrative, or family depiction. Contrast. His character is deliberately set up to contrast with Tiana, a clearly African American protagonist. Verdict. He is not coded as African, though he may have mixed Afro-Caribbean ancestry if part of a Creole/colonial monarchy. Conclusion. Prince Naveen is best understood as a racially ambiguous, multiracial character, possibly from a fictionalized Creole or South Asian influenced nation. If forced to group him, it would be multiracial, bracket, South Asian plus Creole plus Latino coded phenotype and cultural flair. He symbolizes exoticism and quote-unquote foreign royalty in a way that blends brown-skinned global aesthetics without committing to one race, a common Disney approach for racially ambiguous characters. So I decided to do something interesting next, where I showed ChatGPT 5 pictures of him and asked what would his ancestry results look like. I didn't even mention anything about who he is, and I did this in a separate conversation to see what would show up. It says, the character in these images is Prince Naveen from The Princess and the Frog. While Disney never gives a detailed ancestry breakdown, fans often speculate based on his appearance, accent, background, and the fictional country he's from, Maldonia, which is loosely European-sounding but has vague cultural influences. He also ends up in 1920 New Orleans, a melting pot of cultures. If Prince Naveen took a fictional ancestry DNA test, a plausible speculative breakdown might be... And then we're going to go into what it says. Southern European, i.e. Italian, Spanish, and Portuguese, 30%. Maldonia's royal style, formal well, and some linguistic hints suggests Mediterranean influence. North African, 20%. His complexion, some aesthetic inspiration, and the cultural blend of Maldonia hit at North African or Maghrebi ancestry. West African, 20%. His skin tone, hair, and connection to New Orleans might reflect Afro-diasporic roots, especially if Maldonia is a multicultural kingdom. South Asian, Indian, or Sri Lankan, 15%. His accent in the film, as voiced by Bruno Campos, and facial features have led some to speculate a South Asian connection. French or French Creole, 10%. Reflecting his connection to New Orleans and the blending of aristocratic culture with local Creole traditions. Other, mixed or unspecified, representing a blend of possibly Southeast Asian or mixed heritage, given the fictional nature of Maldonia. This mix honors the multicultural vibe Disney gave to Naveen, charming, exotic, ambiguous, and broadly appealing without tying him to a single ethnic group. So, back in the conversation log that I did most of this discussion, I decided to do something more specific. I asked questions that put him in one of the specific groups that we talked about. So here, I asked, what would his admixture in percentages look like if he's a multiracial Latino? If Prince Naveen were a multiracial Latino, especially from the Caribbean or Brazil, the regions where his looks fit best, a realistic admixture breakdown might look like this. Estimated genetic admixture if Prince Naveen were a Caribbean or Brazilian Latino. European, Iberian, i.e. Spanish or Portuguese, estimated 40 to 50%. Description: from colonial settlers and dominant social class, contributes to his nose shape, jawline, and straight teeth. Sub-Saharan African, 30 to 40%. From enslaved African populations brought during the Atlantic slave trade, contributes to his skin tone, lips, and hair texture. Indigenous American, whether it's Taino, Arawak, Tupi-Guarani, etc., 10 to 20%. From pre-Columbian native peoples, contributes to facial softening, like eye shape and cheekbones. Other, which is minimal, Arab, Sephardic Jewish, or South Asian, 0 to 5%, optional. In places like Cuba or Brazil, some families have minor ancestry from Middle Eastern or Indian migration, but this would be subtle. This admixture pattern matches people from the Dominican Republic, which is a very close match, Puerto Rico, Cuba, Brazil, especially Bahia, Rio, or Sao Paulo mixed population, Colombia or Venezuela, urban mulatto/mestizo communities. So, real world parallels: a man from Santo Domingo or Havana with a middle class background and mixed heritage, a Brazilian from Salvador or Rio de Janeiro with a Pardo or Moreno Claro classification, a Puerto Rican Trigueño, a term for medium brown skinned racially ambiguous individuals. And then it got a bit more specific in the summary. If Prince Naveen were a real person of multiracial Latino descent, his approximate genetic admixture might look like 45% European, Iberian, 35% Sub-Saharan African, 15% Indigenous American, 5% other/minor, Middle Eastern, Jewish, etc. This combination would naturally produce someone with his exact skin tone, racially ambiguous features, wavy hair, and globally appealing aesthetic, which is common in the Caribbean and Brazilian Latin America. So I asked the same question, but for someone in the South Asian diaspora. I asked, what would his admixture in percentages look like if he is a South Asian diaspora? It said, if Prince Naveen were from the South Asian diaspora, particularly from the Caribbean, Africa, or the UK, and had visible admixture that gives him his racially ambiguous features, his genetic makeup would likely reflect a blend of South Asian, i.e. Indian, African, and possibly European ancestry. Estimated admixture for a South Asian diaspora Naveen. Ancestry: South Asian, North or East Indian, 55 to 70%. Likely Indo-Aryan ancestry, example from Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, or Tamil Nadu if in the Caribbean, contributes to his base, skin tone, facial structure, and cultural identity. Sub-Saharan African, 20 to 30%. Common in Dougla populations, Indo-African mix in Trinidad, Guyana, Suriname, Mauritius, or East Africa, i.e. Kenya, South Africa. Explains his brown skin tone, full lips, and wavy, curly hair. European, whether it's British, Portuguese, Dutch, or French, 5 to 15%, could come from colonial era European admixture, may subtly influence nose shape, lighter undertones, or jawline. Other, which is Malay, Chinese, or Arab, 0 to 5%, optional. In diaspora regions like Mauritius or Trinidad, there may be minor admixture from other groups due to trade and migration. Regional identities that fit. This admixture is common in Dougla people, i.e. Indian plus African, in Trinidad, Guyana, and Suriname. Indo-Mauritians with some African/Creole admixture. South African Indians with African and European heritage. British South Asians with some mixed Afro-Caribbean lineage. Zanzibari or Kenyan South Asians from coastal intermixing. So, an approximate breakdown example if Dougla from Trinidad or Guyana. 60% Indian, either from Uttar Pradesh or Tamil origin, so pretty much North or South Indian. 30% Sub-Saharan African, and 10% European, whether French, British, or Dutch. So, the summary. If Prince Naveen were from a mixed South Asian diaspora background, he would likely be a Dougla-type figure, a blend of Indian, African, and European ancestry, commonly found in parts of the Caribbean, Mauritius, South Africa, and East Africa. This admixture would naturally explain his medium brown skin, wavy hair, soft but racially ambiguous features, and a charismatic pan-ethnic appeal that doesn't tie him squarely to one background. Okay, so I'm going to attempt to do this quicker. So I asked if he's South Asian, what would his admixture and percentages be based on his phenotype? They said if Prince Naveen were South Asian by origin but had a phenotype as racially ambiguous as his, including medium brown skin, wavy hair, and facial features that aren't strongly South Asian, then he likely wouldn't be of unmixed South Asian ancestry, pretty much stating that he would be mixed. Instead, his looks suggest visible admixture, which is not uncommon in diaspora populations or certain coastal urban or colonial influenced regions of South Asia. Here's a realistic breakdown of what his admixture might look like. So, South Asian, North Indian, Indo-Aryan, 50 to 65%, likely dominant ancestry providing foundational skin tone, facial structure, and cultural identity, likely from Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Punjab, or Lucknow. Sub-Saharan African, 20 to 30%, explains his brown skin tone, full lips, wavy to curly hair. This admixture is possible in descendants of cities, African communities in India, Dougla populations, i.e. Diaspora, or Mauritian/Trinidadian South Asians. European, British, Portuguese, or French, 10 to 15%, may explain his narrower nose, jawline, and subtle Eurocentric features, common in South African, Caribbean, or Goan context. Other, which would be Southeast Asian, Arab, or Persian, 0 to 5%. Optional, depending on historical trade and migration, most likely in Goa, Hyderabad, or coastal Maharashtra. Best regional/community matches. This admixture could be from Dougla, which is Indian plus African, communities in Trinidad, Guyana, or Suriname, Indo-Mauritians with Creole admixture, South African Indians with colonial African and European ancestry, Indians of city descent, descendants of Africans in Gujarat, Karnataka, or Hyderabad. Goans with Portuguese ancestry and some African/Indian mixed, Zanzibari or Kenyan South Asians with African and Arab admixture. So here are some approximate breakdowns of sample profiles. One is an Indo/African/Caribbean mixed. So this is 55% North Indian, which is Upper or Uttar Pradesh or Bihari, 30% African, West African ancestry via the Caribbean, and 15% European, which is British and or French. Example 2. City, Goan, Portuguese mixed. 60% Indian from the southwest coast, 25% African, East African origin, city, and 15% Portuguese. If Prince Naveen were South Asian by heritage, his phenotype strongly suggests a mixed background, something along the lines of 55 to 65% Indian, plus 20 to 30% African, plus 10 to 15% European. This would reflect a Dougla, Indo-Mauritian, or Indo-African Caribbean background, explaining his medium brown skin, racially ambiguous features, and princely cosmopolitan appeal. I then asked if Naveen is Middle Eastern North African based on his phenotype, what would his admixture be in percentages? They said if Prince Naveen were Middle Eastern or North African based on his phenotype, medium brown skin, wavy dark hair, soft but defined facial features, and a racially ambiguous look, he would most likely come from a mixed coastal or urban population with a blend of Arab, Berber, Sub-Saharan African, and Mediterranean ancestry, pretty much stating that he's mixed. Here's a realistic admixture estimate based on his look. Estimated admixture for a Middle Eastern North African identity based on Naveen's phenotype. Arab from the Peninsula or Levantine, 35 to 45%. Base ancestry from regions like Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, or Saudi Arabia. Contributes to his eye shape, nose, and general structure. Berber, so North African Amazi, 15 to 25%. Common in Morocco, Algeria, and Tunisia. Could explain his soft but prominent facial features and olive brown undertones. Sub-Saharan African, 15 to 25%, common in Maghrebi populations due to centuries of trans-Saharan trade and enslaved populations, explains his warm brown skin tone and fuller lips. Southern European, 10 to 15%, historically present via Mediterranean mixing, especially in coastal North Africa and the Levant, could influence bone structure and skin tone. Other, example Turkish or Persian, 0 to 5%, optional trade admixture from Ottoman or Silk Road influence. Best regional matches in the Middle East and North Africa. Based on this blend, Prince Naveen could resemble someone from coastal Morocco or Algeria, example Casablanca or Algiers, Tunis or Tripoli with sub-Saharan admixture, Lebanon or northern Egypt with African and southern European ancestry, Yemen or Oman with Afro-Arab descent like Hadrami or Zanj heritage, Sudan, especially northern or urban areas with Arab/Nubian mixing. An example breakdown of a Maghrebi Arab with mixed heritage. So it shows 40% Arab from the Levantine/North African, 25% Sub-Saharan African, 20% Berber, Amazi, and 15% Southern European, i.e. Spanish or Italian. Another example breakdown from an Afro-Yemeni or Afro-Lebanese, if he were to fit that, it says 45% Arab, Peninsular or Levantine, 30% Sub-Saharan African, 15% Mediterranean European, 10% Berber/Persian/Turkish. Summary. If Prince Naveen were Middle Eastern North African, his phenotype would most closely reflect someone of North African or Arab Afro descent, with an admixture of 35 to 45% Arab, 15 to 25% Sub-Saharan African, 10 to 25% Berber, and Southern European. This blend captures his medium brown skin, softly angular features, and global ambiguity, and matches populations in Algeria, Tunisia, Lebanon, and Yemen with centuries of Arab, African, and Mediterranean mixing. So I asked this question in the separate conversation log, and I did it in the similar conversation log as well. So I pretty much asked here, based on his phenotype, what would Naveen's admixture based on percentages be? And it'll be interesting to see if they are similar or different based on me asking it in the other conversation log. Based on Prince Naveen's phenotype, medium brown skin, wavy dark hair, broad yet soft facial features, full lips, and a racially ambiguous look, his appearance suggests visible admixture from several ancestral regions, rather than fitting neatly into a single ethnic group. His look aligns most with people from multiracial backgrounds in the South Asian diaspora, Afro-Latino, North African, or Eastern Mediterranean populations. So here is an estimated admixture for Prince Naveen based on phenotype. South Asian, North or East Indian, 35 to 45%, reflects its core facial structure, eye shape, and slight golden undertone, common in Indo-Caribbean, Mauritian, and South African Indian diasporas. Sub-Saharan African, 25 to 35%, accounts for its warm brown skin tone, fuller lips, and wavy curly hair texture, typical of mixed Caribbean, Dougla, and Afro-Arab populations. European, so Southern European mainly, Portuguese, Spanish, or French, 10 to 20%, explains refined bone structure and possibly lighter undertones, common in colonial impacted diasporas like Guyana, Mauritius, and Puerto Rico. Levantine Arab/North African, Berber or Arab, 5 to 15%, optional but plausible, could explain his Mediterranean softness and ambiguous features. Other, Malay, Southeast Asian, and Turkish, 0 to 5%. Very minor, occasionally found in diaspora populations in Mauritius, Trinidad, or Zanzibar. So the summary of the look. Prince Naveen's phenotype is best matched by multiracial populations in regions shaped by colonial trade, migration, and creolization, such as Dougla people, Indian plus African in Trinidad, Guyana, or Suriname, Indo-Mauritians with Creole and French admixture, Afro-Latinos in Puerto Rico, Cuba, or the Dominican Republic, Levantine North Africans with Southern European and African roots, and South African Indians with colonial admixture. So the final breakdown, or the approximate breakdown that they gave me here is 40% South Asian, so Indo-Aryan, 30% Sub-Saharan African, 15% Southern European, 10% North African or Levantine Arab, 5% other minor ancestries, so Turkish, Southeast Asian, etc. This blend accounts for Naveen's charismatic pan-ethnic appeal and fits a diasporic or Creole aristocratic background, which aligns with his fictional status as a prince from a fantastical multicultural kingdom. In conclusion, whenever people are saying Prince Naveen's either black, or he's either Indian, or he's either Mediterranean, or what else, they aren't incorrect, but they aren't correct as well. I know that sounds like a contradiction, but you have to remember this. The producers and the company intentionally made Prince Naveen racially ambiguous, so they took traits from several different ethnic and racial groups to put them together, so whomever the individual who is watching the movie can view them, or view Naveen as whatever they want to interpret him as. And people who are racially ambiguous tend to be multiracial more often than not, meaning they have many phenotypic traits from many phenotypic racial and even ethnic groups. And Prince Naveen definitely fits into that. This was pretty interesting to kind of see and to really break down in a way that I never had before or no one else really has before. And even though everything's fictionalized, they create fictionalized characters, fictionalized lands, fictionalized phenotypes based on real life inspirations. So this is what came up. Anyways, thank you all for watching, and this was the next cute, fun thing that I wanted to do, and I hope you all enjoyed it.